You're lying in bed together after an amazing weekend. Everything feels perfect. She's smiling, you're connected, and then, out of nowhere, she picks a fight about something that happened 3 weeks ago. You're confused, you're frustrated, and you're thinking, why does this always happen right when things are going so well? Welcome to PsyCraft Daily, where we break down the hidden patterns in relationships that nobody else is talking about. I'm here to show you what's really happening beneath the surface when closeness triggers conflict. Here's what's actually going on. When she starts an argument right after you've had an incredible connection, it's not random. It's not because she's difficult or looking for problems. There's a psychological mechanism at work that most people completely misunderstand. And once you see it, everything changes. Think about this for a second. Have you ever noticed that the fights don't happen when you're distant? They don't happen when you've been busy all week and barely talked. No, they happen right after the deep conversation, right after the romantic night, right after she's told you something vulnerable and you responded perfectly. That timing isn't a coincidence. Let me show you how this actually works. Inside every person is something psychologists call an intimacy threshold. Picture it like a thermostat, but instead of measuring temperature, it measures emotional closeness. We all have a range where connection feels comfortable, warm enough to feel good, but not so hot that we panic. When someone grows up in an environment where closeness was unpredictable, where love came with conditions or disappeared without warning, that thermostat gets set differently. The range becomes narrow. The moment intimacy crosses into unfamiliar territory, alarm bells start ringing. And here's where it gets interesting. The alarm doesn't sound like fear. It doesn't announce itself as anxiety. Instead, it disguises itself as anger, as criticism, as suddenly remembering every small thing that's been bothering her. Her brain, trying to protect her from the vulnerability of deep connection, creates distance the only way it knows how, through conflict. I want you to imagine you're standing at the edge of a cliff. Beautiful view, right? But get too close to that edge and your body tenses up. You might even step back without thinking about it. That's not because the view got worse. It's because your survival instincts kicked in. For someone with an insecure attachment pattern, emotional intimacy feels like that cliff edge. The closer she gets, the more her nervous system screams danger, even when everything on the surface looks perfect. Most guys, when they see this pattern, make one critical mistake. They think the solution is to prove their love harder, to reassure her more, to chase her during the argument and fix whatever surface issue she's brought up. But here's what most people miss. The argument isn't really about what she says it's about. That thing you did last Tuesday, the way you phrase something at dinner, those are just convenient targets for a nervous system trying to create safety through distance. Let's look at a real scenario. You've just spent Sunday together. No phones, total presence, the kind of day where you both felt completely seen. That night, you're getting ready for bed, and she suddenly brings up how you don't text her enough during the day. You're blindsided because you literally just spent 12 hours together. And it was amazing. You start defending yourself, listing all the times you do text her, and now you're in a full argument about communication patterns when, 6 hours ago, you couldn't have felt more connected. What's really happening beneath that surface complaint? During that perfect day, she let her guard down completely. She felt safe enough to be vulnerable, to need you, to imagine a future where this connection is permanent. And for someone whose early relationships taught them that permanent connection leads to pain, that vulnerability is terrifying, the argument is her unconscious mind's way of testing the relationship. If she pushes you away, will you leave like the others did? Or will you stay, proving that this time might be different? Here's the thing. This isn't manipulation. It's not calculated or intentional. She genuinely feels upset in that moment. Her brain has generated real emotions around that surface issue because it needs to create distance. And emotions are the most effective distance creators we have. She might even be completely unaware that the timing is connected to the intimacy you just shared. But here's where it gets really complex. There's a second layer to this pattern that we need to understand. When she starts that argument, she's not just creating distance. She's also looking for proof. Proof that you can handle her at her worst. Proof that you won't abandon her when she's difficult. Proof that the connection you shared isn't conditional on her being easy to love. Think about this. If you only love her when she's pleasant, agreeable, and making you feel good, then you don't really love her. You love the way she makes you feel. But if you can stay grounded when she's activated, when she's pushing you away, when she's bringing up old hurts or creating new conflicts, you're showing her something her nervous system desperately needs to learn. That intimacy doesn't have to end in abandonment. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. You're 3 months into a relationship. Everything's been surface level fun, casual, no pressure. Then one night, she opens up about her family, about old wounds, about fears she doesn't usually share. You listen, you hold space. You don't try to fix it, you just get it. She feels seen in a way she hasn't felt in years. The next morning, she's cold, she's distant. By evening, she's picking apart something you said weeks ago, questioning whether you're actually compatible, suggesting maybe you both want different things. Your instinct is to panic, to think you did something wrong, that you need to fix this immediately. But pause right there. What if her pulling away isn't evidence that something's wrong? What if it's evidence that something finally went right? What if, for the first time in a long time, she let someone close enough that her defense mechanisms had to activate? So, what do you do when you're in the middle of one of these arguments? First, you need to recognize what's happening, not in a condescending way, not by telling her she's just scared of intimacy. That'll make things worse. But internally, you need to shift your perspective from, we're having a relationship problem, to, her nervous system is recalibrating. When you understand that the argument is a defense mechanism, not a real threat to the relationship, you can stay calm. You can listen to her complaints without becoming defensive because you know they're not actually about you forgetting to text or saying the wrong thing at dinner. They're about her trying to reestablish a sense of safety after vulnerability felt too intense. Here's a framework that actually works. I call it the 3 R's: recognize, regulate, reconnect. First, recognize what's happening, not just intellectually, but in your body. Feel your own impulse to defend, to explain, to fix, and pause before you act on it. Second, regulate your own nervous system. Take a breath. Remember that her activation doesn't require your activation. You can be the steady presence in the storm without dismissing her feelings. Third, reconnect, but not by chasing. By being available without being desperate. By showing through your calm presence that intimacy didn't break anything between you. Let that sink in for a moment. The solution isn't to avoid intimacy to prevent the arguments. It's not to tiptoe around deep conversations or meaningful moments because you're afraid of the fallout. That would just keep you both stuck in surface-level connection forever. The solution is to build her nervous system's tolerance for intimacy by consistently showing up, both during the good moments and during the aftermath. But here's where most guys get stuck. They think being the steady presence means being a doormat. They think not reacting to the argument means accepting disrespect or absorbing whatever gets thrown at them. That's not what I'm saying. There's a huge difference between staying grounded and losing yourself. You can acknowledge her feelings without agreeing that you're the villain in her story. You can stay present without accepting false accusations. It sounds like this. I hear that you're upset. I want to understand what's really bothering you, but I'm not going to accept that I don't care about you or that I'm always doing things wrong. Those things aren't true, and we both know it. Notice what that does. It holds space for her emotions while also holding a boundary around your own worth. It doesn't chase her validation. It doesn't collapse into defensive explanations. It stays rooted in the truth that you care, that you're here, and that the relationship can handle difficult moments without either of you becoming the enemy. Now, Let's talk about the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. Sometimes this pattern doesn't improve. Sometimes, despite your best efforts to stay grounded, to recognize the pattern, to provide consistency, the cycle just keeps repeating. And here's what you need to understand. You cannot heal someone else's attachment wounds through your presence alone. You can create a safe enough space for healing to begin, but she has to do the actual work of rewiring those patterns. If she's not willing to look at these patterns, if she's not open to understanding why intimacy triggers conflict in her, if she insists that the arguments are always about the surface issues and never about anything deeper, then you're fighting a losing battle. Your steadiness might buy you temporary peace, but it won't create lasting change. So, what do you do if you're in that situation? You have to make a choice. Not an ultimatum, not a threat, but a real assessment of whether this relationship is sustainable for you. Because here's the thing, you deserve a partner who's working on their stuff, even if they're not perfect at it. You deserve someone who, when you gently point out the pattern of intimacy followed by conflict, can pause and say, "You might be right. Let me think about that." You don't deserve to be the emotional punching bag every time connection gets too real. Here's what healthy progress looks like. At first, she has no awareness. Intimacy happens, the argument happens, and she genuinely believes it's about whatever surface issue triggered her. Then, with time and your steady presence, she starts to notice the pattern herself. Maybe not during the argument, but after. She'll say something like, "I don't know why I always do this. We have such a good day." And then I find something to be upset about. That's the beginning of awareness. With more time, more safety, more proof that you're not going anywhere, she'll start catching herself during the activation. The argument will begin, but then she'll pause and say, "This is that thing, isn't it? Where I get scared because yesterday was so good." That's progress. Real, meaningful progress. Not perfection. She might still need to work through the emotions, but awareness changes everything. Think about this. A relationship where she never gets triggered by intimacy probably means you're never actually getting intimate. The activation, uncomfortable as it is proof that something real is happening between you. The goal isn't to eliminate the discomfort of vulnerability. It's to build both of your capacities to move through it without blowing everything up. And here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes you're doing this too. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not with the same triggers, but we all have our intimacy threshold. We all have our ways of creating distance when connection feels too vulnerable. Pay attention to your own patterns. Do you pick fights or do you withdraw? Do you get suddenly busy with work? Do you start noticing her flaws more? Do you create emotional distance through sarcasm or teasing that has just a bit too much edge? The most powerful relationships aren't the ones where nobody gets triggered. They're the ones where both people are willing to look at their patterns, to call themselves out, to stay in the discomfort of growth. When she starts an argument after closeness, and you can stay grounded, you're modeling something powerful. You're showing that emotions don't have to control behavior, that awareness creates choice, that love can coexist with difficulty. There's another angle to this we need to explore. Sometimes the argument after intimacy serves a different purpose entirely. It's a way of checking whether you're paying attention, whether you noticed how vulnerable she was yesterday, whether you understand the significance of what she shared. The fight becomes a test. Do you get me? Or was that moment just another good time for you? When she brings up something seemingly unrelated the day after deep connection, she might be asking, "Did you see me? Really see me?" Because if you did, you would understand why I'm on edge right now, why I need reassurance even though I'm expressing it through criticism, why I'm pushing you away to see if you'll come closer. This is where emotional intelligence becomes crucial. You need to be able to translate her surface complaint into the deeper question she's actually asking. When she says, "You never prioritize me," after you just spent an entire weekend together, she's really saying, "Yesterday I showed you parts of myself I don't show anyone. Do you still want me now that you've seen that?" When she criticizes something small, she's asking, Was that real, or am I just setting myself up to get hurt again? So, what do? You acknowledge the surface complaint briefly, but you also address the deeper fear. I know you're upset about me being on my phone earlier, and you're right. I should have been more present. But I also want you to know that yesterday meant everything to me. What you shared, who you were with me, that's exactly who I want. Nothing about that scared me off. See how that works? You're not dismissing her stated concern, but you're also not getting trapped in a debate about phone usage when that's not what this is really about. You're speaking to both levels, the surface and the depth. Let me give you one more scenario. You're out with friends and she's been fine all night. Then in the car on the way home, she gets quiet. By the time you're home, she's upset that you didn't introduce her the right way, or that you were laughing too much with someone else, or that you didn't check in with her enough. You're exhausted. You were just trying to have a good time, and now you're in trouble for reasons you don't fully understand. Here's what might be happening. Being out in public, watching you interact with others, seeing you in your element, that reminds her that you have a life outside of your relationship bubble, that you could choose to connect with anyone, but you're choosing her. And if you're choosing her now, you could unchoose her later. The public setting makes the relationship feel more real, more permanent, and therefore more risky. The argument on the way home is her way of pulling you back into the private world where she feels more control, where she can test whether you're still hers, even when she's not being her best self, whether the connection survives outside the bubble of just you two. What do you do in this moment? You stay calm. You don't take the bait of defending every interaction from the evening. Instead, you say something like, I had a great time tonight, and part of what made it great was having you there with me. I noticed you got quiet in the car. What's going on? You're inviting her to go beneath the surface complaint. You're creating space for the real conversation. Here's the ultimate truth about this pattern. It gets better when both people can name it without shame. When you can be in the middle of one of these post-intimacy arguments and say gently, I think we're doing that thing again. Yesterday was really good, and now we're fighting. Can we talk about what's actually happening here? And when she can hear that without feeling attacked or exposed, that's when real change begins. Because the pattern itself isn't the problem. It's the unconscious nature of it that causes damage. When neither of you knows what's happening, you just keep cycling through intimacy and conflict, getting more exhausted and hopeless each time. But when you both can see the pattern, suddenly you have a choice. You can interrupt it. You can laugh about it, even. There we go again, getting close and then freaking out. What are we going to do with ourselves? That's the relationship worth fighting for. Not the one where closeness never triggers fear, but the one where fear doesn't have to trigger destruction. Where you both know your patterns well enough to catch them in action. Where you can be messy and human and still trust that the connection will survive. So, the next time it happens, because if this is your pattern, it will happen again, remember this. The argument isn't evidence that something's wrong. It's evidence that something's right enough to be scary. It's evidence that you're breaking new ground together. And if you can stay steady through it, if you can see beneath the surface anger to the fear underneath, if you can hold your ground without losing your heart, you're teaching both of you something invaluable. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. That closeness can be safe. That this time, finally, can be different.